So far, we've used timeline to transform an object in space. First, we rotated a wall and made it a bridge. Then, we used the second timeline to change its location. I don't want you to think that timeline is only used for transformation of the object. In one of my games, I even used timeline to build the logic of a jetpack. It's a versatile tool, and today I will demonstrate how it can be used to control intensity of the lights in the level. Let's begin. Before we start, we need to disable one annoying feature of Unreal Engine, the auto exposure option that is turned on by default. There are cases when auto exposure can be a benefit, but I like to control the lighting environment myself. That's why I always recommend to turn it off. To do so, go to the project settings. Search for auto exposure. Untick this auto exposure setting. Now the lighting won't be adjusted automatically. This allows us to take full control of its intensity. Now we can open the level blueprint. This is the event begin play node. It fires automatically whenever the game starts. From the execution pin of the event begin play, I will drag a connection wire and release it nearby. Search for timeline. Now scroll until you find Add Timeline and click on it. Let's call this timeline Directional Light Intensity Modifier. Now we can import the directional light actor right from the outliner. Return to the Level Viewport tab. Search for the directional light in the outline of the level. Drag it onto the Level Blueprint tab. Now drop it somewhere near the timeline. By the way, you can influence any detail and property of the actors from the outliner through the Level Blueprint. This time, we will influence the intensity of the directional light. Let's drag from the output pin of the directional light and release it nearby. Search for Set Intensity. Click on Set Intensity Light component. Let's hook it up with the Update Execution pin of the timeline. Great. Now we need to add a float track to the timeline so that it can affect this new intensity pin of the Set Intensity node. But first, let's check out the default value of the intensity of the directional light so that we can make proper adjustments. For this purpose, we need to return to the Level Viewport. Make sure the directional light actor is selected either in the Level Viewport or the outline. This is the current value of intensity. Let's remember that it's 10. Now we can return to the Level Blueprint. Double-click on the timeline to open it. Add a new float track. Call it the intensity of the directional light. Set the length of the timeline to 20 seconds. Now we need 3 keyframes that will regulate the intensity of the directional light. Let's add first keyframe at time 5 with the value of 2. The second keyframe needs to be at time 10 with a value of 10. The third keyframe should be at time 20 with the value of 2. I think you already guessed it. I want to mimic the day and night cycle in our game. Since the day and night cycle isn't a single occasion, we can force this timeline to loop. To do it, please click on this button. Now let's quickly analyze what goes on here. The timeline starts from here. It goes to this keyframe with the time 5 and value of 2. Basically, this means that first 5 seconds of this timeline, the intensity of the directional light will be at the value of 2. Then the value of the directional light intensity will raise from 2 to 10 until it reaches this second keyframe. Then the value of the directional light intensity will reduce to the value of 2. Since looping of the timeline is enabled, it will automatically restart from time 0. Please return to the event graph. Now we need to hook up the intensity of the directional light output with the input of new intensity of the set intensity node. Okay, now we can compile this level blueprint and then test the game out. I can already tell that the changes in lighting are too subtle to notice. Let's adjust the values in the timeline. I will double-click on the timeline to open it. Now, I will set values of the first and the last keyframe to 0.5. The changes in lighting intensity should be a lot more apparent now. Let's compile and test it out. As you can see, the level is much darker now. It will start to become brighter after it reaches the second keyframe, where the value of intensity was set to 10. Now the brightness will gradually reduce to the value of 2. Finally, since we enabled looping of the timeline, the light should brighten up again. Everything works as a charm. Congratulations! Now you know how to manipulate the intensity of the light using a timeline. Please don't continue to the next lecture until you can pull this off without my assistance. Once you feel confident that you can do it independently, you may proceed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lecture.